talking with Mitchell Baker, live from the Mozilla headquarters in Mountain View, California. We're taking your questions on IRC Instant Message and email. And the first question to come in after our break here comes in from IRC. And Austinus asks, I do not know if it's only the media which portrays it as such, or is it a reality that Mozilla Foundation has a good amount of money in their hands? So what about money, Mitchell? How does Mozilla make its money, and where is it putting that money?
We generate revenue through Firefox and through the search functionality in Firefox primarily. So the search providers, this is Google, Yahoo, plus the commerce providers, all have programs for sharing the revenue that comes from their search. And since Firefox has made search easy and useful and people use it, we generate revenue. And the search providers share that revenue with us. It turns out, in our case, it's about $60 million a year, in that range, so it's a significant amount of money. It's an amount of money that I think no open source project to date that I know of has had yet. There are open source companies, venture-backed companies that happen to use open source software that might generate revenues. But for an open source project, I think we're unique to date. And so that's a pretty big responsibility and a fair amount of new things to think through as a result of that. So that money goes to a few things. Almost all of the expense is to people and infrastructure. And then the rest of that goes into, currently it's I call it a rainy day fund, right? Because you always want to be sure that if your revenue source drives up, you still have reserves to be able to continue the project. So the foundation has a set of money in its reserve fund, and then the corporation has some as well, and the expenses, we try to pay reasonable salaries for our paid employees, and then we spend increasing amounts also on infrastructure as well. So that's where it goes to. We've started some donations and grants programs. The foundation in particular has had a series of grants related to accessibility, and we have a program here for providing equipment and travel funds to a bunch of our contributors. So that's where things are going. We will complete our audit. We make sure that our finances are audited every year. We're in the middle of that process now. That audit should be done, I don't know, in a month or so. And at that point, our financial statements, the audited version, will be posted on the web. And so the actual amounts and what goes, where they're spent will be available.
Okay. A follow-up question on IRC comes from Amsterdammer, who says, it seems that Mozilla may be neglecting Thunderbird with only 2 paid hackers, and plans for Mozilla 2 seem to be Firefox specific. What's Mozilla's position on Thunderbird in the future, and how is Mozilla investing some of that resources in the Thunderbird project?
Well, we're actually investing more in Thunderbird than it might seem currently, in that there are 2 developers, but there's also a fair amount of quality and build and release and marketing work that goes on. So there's more than it appears. Unquestionably, there's much less than there is on the browsing and Firefox space, and that's not likely to change. Some of that is related to what I described earlier, that we see in browsing that the internet landscape is changing, and that the opportunity for us to actually affect the internet landscape and move it towards a more open setting is enormous in the browsing space and not nearly as big in the mail space. So we don't see the kind of innovation that we do in mail, and we don't see ourselves driving fundamental changes in mail through the Thunderbird project. And so that's the reason why the investment in Thunderbird hasn't grown the same way it has in Firefox. So I think that's the correct allocation of funds given the opportunities in front of us. I think we have a rare opportunity now. We've already done this. We've demonstrated that the Mozilla project is effective enough, and our products in Firefox are effective enough to be able to pull other industry players with us. And that includes even Microsoft, to move the internet towards a more open, better place. So that's a big opportunity. And I think our focus on that opportunity is correct. What to do for Thunderbird to help Thunderbird and or Mail have their own best opportunity to grow is a very good question. I think we're treating Thunderbird fairly here in terms of resources, but it might be that some different arrangement might help Thunderbird grow more or might help mail develop more. And so that's a topic of conversation. I don't actually know what the answer to that is right now. And it might well be that there's a base of Thunderbird users for whom continued Thunderbird development as it is today is the right path, and there might be a set of people who want something really different in mail. And so any of those we could look at. So I guess I'll try and summarize. I do think we're doing a fair amount for Thunderbird. It's clearly overwhelmed given the opportunity in the browsing space. I think that's a correct allocation. So my own personal view is I'm not inclined to try and match investment in Thunderbird to meet the Firefox investment. Given that, I think the question of what's best for Thunderbird and what's best for mail is a bit open right now. And I think probably what makes sense is to start a much more public discussion on these topics. So sometime in the next, I don't know, say a week or 10 days, maybe I'll do that.